Slovakia is a country of cruel winters, staring children and frankly lethal pedestrian crossings. But after 27 years of living here, I still feel like it's a pretty safe place to be. Stick with me for the next 10 minutes and I'll tell you why, and also about the only time that I was accosted in the street for being a liberal bird watcher. Hello and welcome to the Blorecast, your regular serving of aural entertainment with me, James Blore. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about safety. Over the last 27 years of living in Slovakia, it has proved to be a fairly safe place, at least for me. I should, of course, point out that I'm not a woman and I'm not visibly a member of a minority until I open my mouth. And that clearly could have coloured my experiences. So if you have had different experiences, please do write in the comments. At least we probably can agree that in terms of natural disasters, Slovakia is pretty safe. We don't have any volcanoes as far as I'm aware, or at least not active ones. Nothing in the way of earthquakes. There's no coastline, so no tsunamis. There are winds, and there was a terrible wind in 2004 in the Tatry, which laid waste to a large number of trees, I think. But on the whole, we don't have property-destroying stuff that much. No hurricanes. The occasional tornado these days, apparently, but those are near the border with Austria, I think, where there's a larger amount of flat land. So I'm hoping that I'm reasonably safe from those. Forest fires probably are a thing. I don't live too near the forest, so I'm hoping to avoid that one. I think it's not perhaps on the scale that it might be in Australia or that we've seen in other parts of Europe even this year. The one thing that Slovakia is victim to is flooding, and I think quite a lot of people have suffered at the hands of horrible water filling their houses, which is something that frankly fills me with terror. And my heart, such as I have, does go out to those people. I've tried to avoid that risk by building my house on a hill and also building it a little higher than it actually needs to be and not having any kind of cellar. I don't know if that will keep me safe, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We do have snow, though, more than there is in Britain typically, but not anything I think you would refer to as a natural disaster. By coincidence, there's quite a lot of that around at the moment, and it's only November. But although it's referred to as a katastrofa, which might in English be a snowpocalypse or snowmageddon, it's usually it causes problems with traffic, but not nearly on the same scale as it might in Britain, where one single flake of snow causes all trains to be cancelled, and temperatures above 25 degrees cause the roads to buckle. Slovakia tends to be a bit more hardy in those respects and a bit more prepared. I guess it's got more gritters and more experience with such things. Heat waves in the summer certainly are a thing, and it's not very pleasant, but you kind of stay out of those. Just stay inside. Air conditioning has been a blessing for the last few years. It's really turned my life around and stopped me complaining quite so much. So the weather is pretty good on the whole, at least nothing too disastrous. In terms of crime and safety on the streets, well, as I mentioned before, I'm not a visible minority and I'm not a woman, so forgive me if you've had horrible experiences. Also, I don't go out of the house that much, so I'm perhaps not the best person to speak about this. But on those rare occasions when I do venture out, I have had very, very few problems in all my time here. The worst thing that has ever happened to me is once, it was a Saturday and we had some exams and I was on a break from exams and I thought, I'll just pop out for half an hour, get a breath of fresh air, maybe do a bit of bird watching in the university campus, which was nearby. And I had my bird watching outfit on, so like a little vest with some pockets in it and my binoculars and my camera and hat. And I was walking through the university campus and I saw these guys sitting on a bench, clearly drinking something. And they sort of started calling to me, "Oyo! Oyo!" Which means, well, it means literally uncle, but it's the kind of word that you use for any random bloke who's not obviously of grandfather age, which would be dziadko, I suppose. And I guess I'm probably heading that way. But ujo it was. The female version would be tieta. And funnily enough, those two words, ujo and tieta, were the first two words out of my daughter's mouth. She's fully bilingual in English and Slovak, but and I would say, if anything, English is her first language because all of her media and books and whatnot have always been in English. But her first words were Slovak, and they were ujo and teta while pointing at a Chibo catalogue, I think. Ujo, teta. Quite easy to say, I guess. Anyway, that's beside the point. These blokes who were sitting on a bench, and it quickly became apparent that they were a bit drunk, and they were saying, ujo, podsem, come here, ujo. And I thought, oh, you know what? No thanks. I'm really not getting involved with this. And I sort of veered off in the other direction. And they continued to sort of shout, ujo, no, podsem, pod tu. And I really wasn't having any of it, and speeded up a little bit to try and get away from them. And I think they were a bit disappointed that I was refusing to interact with them, and they started to get a bit hostile and shouted at me, "Oh, ti liberalni buzerant," which means you liberal. Well, buzerant is a sort of general word of abuse, but the original meaning would be sort of puff or gay boy or something. And I was thinking, how do you know? But I guess it was the bird-watching clothes that gave me away. I hurried along my way, and they left me alone after that. And that was about the only trouble that I've really had that I can remember on the streets of Slovakia. While we're on the subject of streets, I should probably mention life as a pedestrian in Slovakia. It's not the craziest of countries for cars and stuff, but I was a little shocked when I first came here at the sheer number of pedestrian crossings and the complete disregard that motorists pay to them. They used to say in Humane that the cars didn't have to stop at the pedestrian crossings unless there was a critical number of people waiting by the side of the road. That number was never precisely determined, but that was the attitude. So basically, as a pedestrian, you had to wait until the cars went away, which kind of renders the crossing redundant. To my mind, that's where the pedestrians are supposed to have priority. This situation is further complicated by the fact that there are so very many of them. Basically, every time the pavement or sidewalk for our American viewers is interrupted by a side road or something, there tends to be a pedestrian crossing there. And, you know, this seems very sensible from the perspective of the pedestrian, but it can lead to some pretty awkward situations for the cars, especially when, for example, you have a pedestrian crossing just after the exit to a roundabout. Not the easiest place to stop as a car. This is further compounded by the fact that some pedestrians just also completely ignore the crossings, and even though you might have two separated by just 100 meters, you'll find people just ambling across the road exactly in the middle between the two pedestrian crossings, blithely unaware of whatever problems they might be causing for motorists. However, do be careful if you plan to visit Slovakia as a tourist. Cars don't always take pedestrian crossings as seriously as they should. I haven't had any injuries, at least, but it definitely does happen, and I've had a few BMWs give me some evil looks when I made them stop. While I haven't felt any actual danger on the streets, I am the victim, and I use the term very loosely, of Slovak staring. Clearly not the worst thing that could happen to you, but Slovaks do like to stare in the most disconcerting fashion. It's not just kids, but especially kids in supermarkets. You know, I'll be speaking English because I tend to speak English with my family, and, you know, obviously it's a bit different, and they'll be looking at me like that. And you're kind of expecting the parents to say, "Jakob, stop it, it's rude to stare," but nobody ever does. They're like, "Oh, it's just a kid, let him stare, maybe I'll join him." And you stare back and the person just continues. People do stare in Britain, obviously, but when you catch their eye, they tend to look away in embarrassment. I spent a month in London when I was much younger, and I had to commute on the tube train, and the seats are sort of opposite each other, so you're looking at the person across from you, except, of course, you're not looking at them. You're either looking at the tube map above their head, or your own book or newspaper, or maybe their newspaper headlines there, and God forbid that you should ever look between the map and the book. You're quickly flitting from one to the other for fear of making any kind of eye contact. In Slovakia, not really a problem, you know. You can people will be looking at you, and then you sort of look back and think, "Oh, well, you know, I'll stare back." Obviously, they'll look away, and they don't. They just carry on staring. But, I mean, to be fair, it doesn't really hurt. I can imagine it might be pretty annoying for people who look more different than me. But there are worse things that could happen. So if those are my worst experiences in Slovakia, I don't really think I have anything to complain about. So that's my experience after nearly 3 decades in Slovakia. Mostly safe, sometimes strange, and occasionally a little bit uncomfortable. Much like anywhere else in the world. Well, what about you? I'd love to hear about your experiences. Do you feel safe in Slovakia? And if you're learning English, thank you very much for learning it with me. This has been the Blorecast. I'm James Blore, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.